Good morning and welcome to the Social Justice Forum, and thank you for coming today. I thought last weekend was cold, but today is colder, so thank you for coming. The Social Justice Forum's focus this program year is acting based on our values, avoiding despair, in which we will seek to understand our continuing responsibility to help build a loving, sustainable, and just community. Today, we're pleased to welcome several guests from the Advocates for Human Rights. Their presentation, The Humanity Beyond the Stark Numbers, The Faces and Food of Immigration, begins with Executive Director Michele Garnett McKenzie. She'll provide us a brief update on the Advocates' continuing work to implement human rights standards that promote civil society and to reinforce the rule of law. Michele will then introduce the authors of Kitchens of Hope, and you'll see a table over there, with a cookbook of traditional dishes from around the world that is driven by the stories of how 35 immigrants from 32 countries had landed in the United States, most of them in Minnesota. The cookbook captures not only the recipes, but the humanity beyond the statistics in the news. 3 volunteers will be presenting, 2 from the law firm of Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith in Minneapolis, and as well as a food writer for the Minneapolis Star Tribune, Minnesota Star Tribune, excuse me. Cookbooks will be on sale after the presentation. Take the next. So before we get into the presentation, a few logistical terms. We ask you to hold questions and comments until after our presentation, as usual. For those attending in person, we'll bring a microphone to you to share your questions and comments, so we want to capture them on the recording. And for those attending on the live stream, please submit your comment or question in the live stream chat, and somebody will be monitoring that and bringing that to the attention of the rest in the room. And next, please. As part of our ongoing effort to promote respectful conversations around concerns in our community, we've established guidelines that you'll see up here. Please take a minute to review them. And before we get started, a short prayer. Let us pray. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us engage with mindfulness, following the leading voices of our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so that we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. So now, please welcome Michele Garnett McKenzie and colleagues.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for, this is a very full room if you're on Zoom. Many of your friends and colleagues have shown up despite it being a bitter cold morning. So thank you all, and I welcome everyone on Zoom as well. As Pat said, Michele Garnett McKenzie. I'm the executive director of the Advocates for Human Rights, and many of our Advocates for Human Rights staff and board members are here today. So if you don't know an advocate for human rights, you can meet one today. Thank you so much, Westminster, for welcoming us into this community, into the Social Justice Forum, and for being a sustaining partner of the advocates. This partnership in mission really matters. It matters to our hearts and our souls. It matters to our colleagues and our clients, and we are so grateful. For those of you who don't know us, the Advocates for Human Rights works in our home community and with our partners around the globe to build legal systems that protect women and LGBTIQ plus persons from violence. We work to abolish the death penalty. And what we're going to talk about today, we work to build systems of migration that work so that no matter where we're born, no matter where we live, people can thrive and can live with dignity. We believe at the Advocates for Human Rights, and I think a few of you are doing this day to day, right? That each of us has the power to defend human rights. Last year, more than 1,600 individual volunteers worked with us. They worked with us to provide free legal help to immigrants, to people seeking asylum from persecution, people fleeing human trafficking, to kids facing deportation on their own, and increasingly again to people detained by ICE. People worked with us to document human rights violations in immigration court. And people worked with us to advocate for respect for human rights by showing up at the United Nations. This is our day-to-day work. We all have this power to do something, to be a part of changing our world for good. So I was tasked with the doom portion of today's event, which will be very small because we need the hope portion more than ever. That is why we are here. But before we turn to hope, I want to share a little bit about what's happening right now to our immigrant neighbors and really to the promise of protection that the United States has offered since our nation came into being. Since 1980, the U.S. has offered asylum to people fleeing persecution. But in recent months, we are seeing unprecedented attacks on that. Every single day, asylum seekers are showing up at immigration court only to learn that their cases have been dismissed. And instead of having a hearing about whether they should be sent back to face persecution or torture, they're going to be indefinitely detained while they claw their way back into a hearing from behind bars in a jail or a detention center somewhere in the United States. Or they find that their asylum case is just being denied without a hearing, without a chance to show up and give evidence, without a chance to testify, that the judge just looked at the form and said, not good enough, and they're out. Or they're being threatened with being sent to a third country, a country they've never been to, that has been coerced into signing an agreement to accept asylum seekers, and countries that can only accept a few people at a time, countries that have no asylum protection system once the person arrives there. These tactics are being used to pressure desperate families to give up their cases and go away. The risk of imprisonment or exile to some place that won't protect you could be too great to take. And now, using the pretext of the tragic shooting of National Guard members last month, more than 1.4 million asylum cases that are pending outside the court system have been placed on indefinite hold. So we will have our asylum seeker friends and neighbors remain asylum seekers indefinitely, not getting to a place where they can say, yes, this is your home. That means their families are left behind to face danger. That means they have to pay now $100 a year to keep that case going. That means continued anxiety and constant threat of being put back into deportation or being put into detention. And now, of course, you've seen Operation Metro Surge in action. After months of this escalating enforcement here, we now have our Somali neighbors at the center of the storm. We've seen enforcement actions throughout the region in the last few days. And I get alerts. I don't know if any of you are participating in any of the Constitutional Observer or Upstander cadres that are run by our friends at Copal or Unidos or Merak. But we're seeing alerts to show up at construction sites, in malls, at apartment buildings like Cedar Riverside, and warehouses like the Amazon warehouse, restaurants, college campuses, city streets, state highways. ICE is entering homes and businesses. They're in parking lots, and they're pulling people over to make arrests, right? They're not pulling everybody over. They're pulling over people who look or sound like immigrants. So today, U.S. citizens in Minneapolis are walking around carrying their papers, carrying their passports to prove they're citizens. I spent all day yesterday with Somali organizers training people on what documents they need to carry and show and how they can make a decision as a U.S. citizen who was born in Minnesota, whether they want to show their passport when asked, which I don't think we have a national ID requirement that we carry on us, right? Or they don't, and they want to risk arrest. And sometimes even that is not enough. We saw one of the people I spoke to yesterday was a woman whose nephew is a Somali American young man born here in Minneapolis, who was thrown to the ground and was trying to explain he is a citizen and has his passport, and ended up being dragged out to ICE before being released. As Robin Phillips, who's here, would say, "What? This is outrageous," right? If anybody knows Robin, that is what she says each and every day, and this is outrageous. So Kitchens of Hope is more important than ever. It is more important than we could have ever envisioned when you started this project. The celebration of resilience and of joy and of culture and of community that are embedded in this volume. That's what our immigration policy can be about. It's what it should be about. And I'm so proud to be able to welcome Linda Svitak. She's going to start us off. Linda is one of those Faegre attorneys and a volunteer with the Advocates in so many ways. I think you've been a number of different places with us. And then Lee Svitak Dean, who, if you haven't seen her, you've seen her byline at the Star Tribune for many, many years. And then Chris Eaton, who will be sharing some of the pieces of the actual stories from the volume. Chris is also at Faegre. We are so grateful to you. Linda, take it away.
Let's see. Got to adjust this just a little bit, Michelle. Well, good morning and welcome, and thank you for coming out on this cold day. We would like to thank Westminster and the Social Justice Forum for hosting us. We are inspired by your longstanding commitment to social justice and the crowd that we have today. And we'd also like to thank the Advocates for Human Rights for its counsel on our book, but also for the important work that it has done for more than 4 decades. In these challenging times, as Michelle has just commented, the Advocates' work is more important than ever. We're delighted to introduce you to our book today, Kitchens of Hope: Immigrants Share Stories of Resilience and Recipes from Home. The book offers a small window into the world of immigration, highlighting 37 immigrant contributors from 32 countries, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, as we say. The book collects stories and recipes from individuals who have traveled to the United States with the hope of something better, whether those journeys were prompted by violence in their homelands or the need for education or business opportunities or family reunions in the United States. With nearly 60 recipes in the book that reflect the heritage of the participants, we are reminded that, in the words of one contributor, food is our roadmap of our people and our culture. Kitchens of Hope got its start with a simple suggestion by a colleague at the Advocates who proposed making a cookbook with recipes that were gathered from clients of the Advocates. But recipes require context. And as we expanded our reach and asked contributors how and why they made their long and oftentimes grueling journeys, we found their stories to be so compelling that we realized that this perspective, their stories, needed to be a centerpiece of the book. Though we started by interviewing immigrants who had connections with the Advocates, the contributors grew organically from there as we reached out to other organizations that serve the immigrant community. Contributors suggested friends who were interested in participating. And we also turned to those that we knew who were immigrants. And there we were surprised to discover some really remarkable histories that had never come to light in our everyday conversations. From the beginning, we wanted to ensure that we had contributors from all over the world so that we could better reflect the larger story of immigration, as well as provide greater variety of recipes for the book. We kept a spreadsheet of the countries where our contributors were from, so we could easily track where we may need additional and new voices. We organized the chapters of the book in a non-traditional way, by themes that emerged in the stories that evolved from the stories that we were told. Community, resilience, opportunity, justice, hope, and celebration. We asked the contributors for recipes that reminded them of home. And so these recipes carry very special memories. Many of these recipes came from mothers or other family members. Some of the recipes came to us neatly typed in a form that you would expect to see in a cookbook, and other recipes had never been written down before. So we gathered them in the kitchens, cooking in our own kitchens, with one person writing down copious notes while others chopped vegetables, boiled chicken, and made rice. One recipe came to us in Arabic, which was then translated to French before it arrived to us in English. Many recipes came to us in Spanish. Many of the cooks noted that the recipes, excuse me, that they sent came in many variations, but the one that they provided was the best. And we can certainly attest to that, given that we have made these recipes many, many times, and they are the best. These recipes are treasures, but it's really the stories that are the heart of Kitchens of Hope. These personal stories put a face on immigration. When all that we hear about immigration is stark numbers, visas, green cards, populations, immigrants and their lives do not seem real to many people. The stories in Kitchens of Hope provide important context that reflect immigrants in real life, working and making a difference in their communities. These stories are a counterpart to the false narratives that immigrants are criminals, that they are somehow invading our country, or that they hate America. In Kitchens of Hope, we have nurses, teachers, translators, chefs, doctors, immigration lawyers, administrators, and so many more who have so much to offer, including leadership and community building. These stories are powerful. They can be transformative. They need to be heard to counter the fear of those who are perceived to be different from us. I'd like to share a part of one of the stories with you. In the foreword to the book, one of our contributors, Lan Nguyen, tells both her stories of rescue when Saigon fell to the North Vietnamese in 1975, as well as how one person can make a difference in the lives of others. I believe in the power of one. Each of us individually has the potential to make an indelible difference in the lives of those around us and for many generations. One man, a captain of a ship, made the decision to pick up my family along the beaches of Saigon on April 30th, 1975, when the city fell to the North Vietnamese troops. All the ships were out in the harbor or at sea. My father waved his white shirt and begged for one of the nearby ships to come back to get his children, even if they could not take him and my mother. The captain saw us, my parents and 4 little children, ages 6 years old and younger, and he sent a boat to pick us up, to transport us to the ship, which was already fully loaded with passengers. This captain's single decision saved our lives, as my father was in counterintelligence for South Vietnam, and there was no doubt he would have been killed if he was unable to escape. My father and the ship captain remained lifelong friends. Many years later, when my father made his annual phone call in April to thank his friend, he asked the captain what made him come back to pick us up. The captain said he was moved to help when he saw my father's 4 children and heard his plea to take us without our parents. Today, one of my sisters is a James Beard Award-winning journalist. One of my brothers owns a restaurant and bar that employs dozens of people. Another sister became a child therapist and helps immigrants. And the baby brother, born in the refugee camp of Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, is an alumnus of Harvard University and a political consultant. For me, I lived my dream of becoming a human rights and immigration lawyer, along with being the mother of 2 beautiful girls who are first-generation Americans. I hope our captain knows the ripple effect that he initiated, his own power of one. I do, as we gather around my parents' dining table in Houston for my mother's pho for Christmas, each Christmas Eve. I am forever grateful. Lan tells more of her story in Kitchens of Hope, as well as provides her mother's recipe for pho, which I believe is right over there. It's right over there. This is one of nearly 40 stories in the book, and each one of these stories matters. One by one, they each speak to the larger story of immigration and the people who are behind the stark numbers. It's time they're heard. Thank you. I'll pass it to Lee.
Good morning. There's a timeless nature to the issues of immigration, which have arisen in many waves over the course of American history. Think Chinese in the 1800s for the gold rush and railroads. Then the Scandinavians and Germans later in that century, with Irish, Italian, and so many more in the first half of the 20th century, all bringing their comfort foods with them. Sauerbraten, corned beef, spaghetti and meatballs, lutefisk, among them, all recipes that have become part of the American menu. Well, maybe not the lutefisk, but it was a good try. In our book, we have focused on individuals who have come not only with hope, but also with contributions for their new neighborhoods, from leadership in a community building to the foods and the traditions that they brought with them. We are firm believers that there is no better way to understand one another than by sharing a meal. Now, I have some questions for you related to food. How many of you have eaten that beef Vietnamese soup called pho? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you have tried baklava from the Middle East? How about picadillo from Cuba? Pozole or mole from Mexico? Well, we've got a well-traveled group here. How about biryani from India or Iraq? Well, let's move to the kitchen. How many of you have cooked with star anise or tomatillos? How about plantains? Garam masala. Well, you know where this is going. And by the way, all these dishes are in the book, of course. We eat better because of the influence and the ingredients of immigrants who have come to this country. As one food writer put it, when people move around, food gets better. We wholeheartedly agree. Food and family are woven into the fabric of immigrants' lives as they adapt to a new world. Indeed, food provides the connection to homelands that is imprinted on each one of us. The recipes and kitchens of hope recall the fragrances from mealtime prep, from open-air markets, and neighbors who stop by for a meal in those homelands. These recipes serve as roadmaps of where people have left and the journeys that they have taken. The recipes originated from grandmothers and mothers and aunties to the contributors who are part of this book. Several of those contributors were in constant contact with their relatives when they were getting the details of the recipes. They wanted to be sure that they were authentic to mom or auntie or grandma. One of those contributors was Nadia from Latvia, who called her mother in Latvia to get permission to run the family recipe that had been used for celebrations for generations. Gustavo from Mexico, a chef now in Minnesota, from Oro in northeast Minneapolis. The dish that made the difference to him was mole that his mother made. And he was on the phone again to Mexico over and over again because even though he makes mole in his restaurant, different varieties of it, it wasn't his mom's style, and he knew it had to be his mother's. To Linda's point, because hers actually was the best. So we have Maya, who is Hmong, who shared her recipe for a special chicken soup served throughout a month to Hmong women who had just given birth. We have a recipe from Degi from Mongolia, who offered dumplings served at the Lunar New Year. And that's a time when friends and family gather to celebrate the joy of overcoming a harsh winter, which sounds like a very good celebration to have. We have Halima of Somalia, who shared the recipe for her country's traditional dish of sambusas, now made by a company that she and her sisters started here in Minneapolis. These sambusas are sold to dozens of school districts throughout Minnesota, where they are a popular lunch dish among students. All of these recipes are gifts that the contributors have made, in addition to their stories, made for you. I have a little excerpt here from the introductions to the book on just the significance of food, not only to immigrants, but really to all of us. They packed little but memories as they headed to the United States. For immigrants trying to fit a lifetime into a suitcase, there was not much room. They carried with them thoughts of home,
of family and friends, of the aroma of cardamom, the tang of fish sauce, the heat of chili peppers, the bite of mustard greens. As they rebuilt their lives in the United States, they turned to the familiar comfort foods and traditions that lingered in their hearts, minds, and palates. Curry and mole, biryani and borscht, pita and pho, sambusas and pupusas. Together, this wealth of flavors and fragrances would ignite their senses and expand the world for their new friends and neighbors. In closing, we invite you to meet these remarkable women and men in the book, people who took leaps of faith, who uprooted their families or themselves, persevered at great effort, all to begin lives new in the United States. They are our neighbors, our colleagues, and our friends, and they have generously given us a peek into their lives and their kitchens. Welcome to the Kitchens of Hope table.
So I join everyone in thanking you very much for having us here today. And we did want to share a few more of the stories. So we are just so honored to have been trusted with these stories. And it really has been a highlight of my life. So I want to start by sharing a little bit of the story from Bridget Chivimbiso Chukunwe. Her life began in a small farming town in Zimbabwe where everybody knew one another. People grew their own food or would share the fresh produce and the poultry and the meat that they had. But Bridget became a police target, and in 2015, she fled the country to escape persecution. After landing in Panama, she walked almost the entire journey, with bus rides as occasional respites. In Central America and Mexico, Bridget often found farmers eating food from their gardens. The people were very welcoming, she says. They will even call you over to eat. Come and eat. Come and eat. Are you short of money for the bus? At the U.S. entry point where she was interviewed, an immigration official gave Bridget a pass, a bus ticket, and $50. She still remembers his name. Bridget loves to cook and uses fresh food whenever possible. Her recipe is for a spicy stewed beef served with kale and sadza, a traditional porridge from her country. Now meet Omar Guevara Soto. He discovered his passion for making good food as a young boy, when he could not wait to get to his grandmother's restaurant after school. Located in the middle of Puebla, Mexico, the restaurant sat on a street that led to a market, and from a tiny door in the alley, his family sold tamales and atole, a hot chocolate corn drink, to vendors who started making their way at 3 o'clock every morning. Omar first came to Minnesota as a teenager, recruited for the YMCA Camp Warren experience, if you'll believe it. And then later, after quite a few different life passages, when a job opened in food service for the Minneapolis Public Schools, he took it. As Assistant Director of Culinary and Wellness Services, Omar helped lead a quiet revolution, fundamentally changing the way that school lunch is made. Today, most Minneapolis schools have kitchens, and a lot of cooking from scratch cooking is going on. Omar shares the recipe for tres leche cake, a dessert his grandma made, which is filled with delicious sweetness. It is this recipe, he says, that always brings me home. Following high school, Mehmet Turkoglu attended Istanbul University, where he was introduced to human rights law. He recalls feeling mesmerized, poring through massive texts to understand human rights movements around the world and the sacrifices that people made to effect change. His studies were not only academic, but personal, as he began to understand his own story, the discrimination he experienced as a Kurdish minority in Turkey, and the insidious nature of prejudice. All these forces shaped Mehmet's ideas and his commitment to be a voice for human rights. Menemen, a simple meal made of eggs, tomatoes, peppers, and spices, is a dish that reminds him of home. A perfect meal, delicious and easy to cook, he says. Menemen is for everyone. Mila's family fled their country during the Bosnian War. Mila created a new life in Minnesota by always looking forward. Life is not easy, but we must keep trying, she said. Though settled in Minnesota, Bosnia is not far from her mind. She has fond memories of her home country, surrounded by a large garden with lots of vegetables and flowers, and in particular, the roses. Her mother made a favorite drink from the flower petals. Mila shares 2 recipes for Bosnian pita and baklava. Not to be confused with the flatbread of the same name, Bosnian pita is a traditional pastry made of handmade dough that's stretched paper thin and then filled with various things. She prefers a filling of spinach, green onions, and feta. The dish is served with homemade yogurt, and her grandchildren love it and they ask for her to make it again and again. As to the baklava, you know many countries claim it as their own, but Mila insists that the Bosnian version is best. We are reminded by Tekla Rurapali, who came to the United States from Germany and who serves as Director of Development for the Advocates for Human Rights, that the people we see as clients are the few who were able to leave. It's survivor bias. They were strong enough to walk for hundreds or even thousands of miles. They may have survived trafficking or whatever happened to them at the border. They often can draw on their resilience and strength. And together, she says, immigrants make the community more vibrant. We wish that we could share excerpts from every story because each of the people in these pages has inspired us, and we hope that they will inspire you. And now I think we invite your questions. Just getting a microphone.
Well, thank you so much to all of you for being here today. With all of the immigrants that you've worked with, how did you go about the process of selecting contributors to the volume?
You know, it was interesting because there was some level of self-selection because we had a number of people. We actually had more people than the 37 who ultimately are in the book. But because of the times, we had people who dropped out of the book. They felt that, you know, they could not go forward, and it might actually put their families at risk. Families in particular who were in other parts of the world. We also had, we took great precautions in this book to make sure that everything was voluntary. We gave people many opportunities to look over the, the drafts of the stories, because oftentimes when you just have a conversation and have someone tell a story and then you go back and read it, you realize that perhaps I said more than I feel comfortable sharing. We also had people who chose not to have their photographs in the book. And we also had people who changed their names. So there were many things that occurred that, that kind of trimmed down some of the group that we had originally begun with. And there were some people, as I mentioned, who just plain decided that the timing was such that we just didn't feel comfortable being in a book that would be public. So we did try to include, you know, everyone that we could, leaving those other decisions to the contributors themselves.
You know, and I would just like to mention that one of the things that we did consider as we were gathering people for the contributions is that we wanted to reflect that immigration is a worldwide phenomenon. Oftentimes, if you are just paying attention to the news, you might get a sense that, well, it's only involving country X. And in fact, people everywhere, from Canada, from Norway, you know, from Germany are moving here, as well as from other countries. And so what we did to sort of keep track of that was, and actually there were 2 reasons for that. One is because we had both stories and recipes. We wanted to have a variety of stories. If we had too many people from a single country or a single region, we thought that the stories might have a similarity to them that would be just less interesting in the context of a book. But also, if everyone's coming from only a couple places, the recipes also are going to be reflective of that particular place. And we thought that the broader perspective that we could have with the recipes as well as the stories would be helpful. So we kept a spreadsheet. Here's the people from Latin America. Here's the people from Western Europe. Here's the people from Africa, Southeast Asia, and on and on. And we wanted to be sure that we had sort of equal numbers of each. And if we felt like we needed a few more from Latin America, we went out and looked for more people from that region. So we also were sort of we were active in looking for people. So it wasn't totally random.
The authors are being very modest because not only was this a tremendous amount of work, but as a member of the board of the advocates, I want to point out that are giving the profits to the advocates. So thank you very much.
I also want to thank you for being here today because it has really, I guess, shed more light on kind of the breadth of what's going on, not just right now, but kind of a history. What can we do? I often wonder, watching TV and looking at what's going on, the atrocities of how these people, particularly the Somalian people, are being treated here in Minnesota. What can we do just on an everyday basis that would help them?
Yeah. They ran over with a mic, so I'll take that as a hint. We can all do something. That's one thing. It feels so, overwhelming, and it's going to be different for each of us. There are things from as simple as donating money to, that helps. Donating time for our court observers, going out, being part of the response teams that are standing up out in the streets, or taking time to write that letter to the editor or have a conversation with a person in your circle who maybe is at a business that's letting ICE stage their campaign in their parking lots. Or, we can all do something to interrupt that. Ultimately, it's our responsibility for the immigration laws we have, for the budget that ICE has been given, which is, I think, $177 extra billion on top of their regular operating money. We made this system, and we need to be active in making the system that we want through our work with elected officials as well. So it's that whole breadth. Don't be overwhelmed. Pick a thing that works for you and do that.
And I'm so grateful for Michelle's response, because what Michelle just gave us is ways that we can respond along a continuum. And so if you are not ready to do upstander training, and it's really great, maybe you would be more comfortable writing that letter. And that example of writing a letter to say, I am one of your customers, the fact that you are letting people stage in this place, that is a wonderful way to encourage non-cooperation. And so that's what we all get to do as well, is look for these small acts of non-cooperation. And then deeper in, go to training with Amy Hill, become court observers. We have people in this room that are doing it. We have people who are in training to do it. So there's no shortage of things, and I'm always willing to talk through ideas with you as your Associate Pastor for Justice and Mission about where to find your place along that spectrum. So, and Jan has a question.
I just want to add one brief comment. Since we're in a church, we can also pray, right? That's the other thing I just want to call out too. We can pray, and we can witness, to people's humanity in one conversation at a time, in one encounter at a time.
Hi. First of all, kudos. This is a brilliant idea. Kudos, that's all I'm saying. A very simple question. Given the amount of detentions that are going on now, how available are legal services for people who are arrested and detained?
Lee, do you want to take that one? Just kidding. She's looking at me with a desperate look in her eye. The question of access to legal services, there's not enough there are, so many more people detained. The target number on the sites is 100,000 people per day in ICE detention nationwide. That is what we're budgeted for. We're probably 60,000 per day right now and counting. So overwhelmed, the odds are not in your favor. But at the Advocates, we're part of a robust collaborative who gets out to the detention centers that are sort of more established. They are adding ones all the time, so we are scrambling. We do need more people willing to go into the detention centers and take calls from detention, because once people are there, it's very hard to put on a defense. The other thing we need to do is continue to have people have a plan for their immigration case before they're detained. Once detained, you have the coercive power of the state saying, we can move you anywhere, you don't have your friends, you don't have your family, you don't have your evidence. But having a plan and knowing what to do before detention has been a big focus of our legal work. So we're lucky to be in a collaborative community. We've got our fellow immigration legal service providers out there with us. We're not alone, but we're not going to win this game in numbers.
I have a couple questions from the chat. So the first one is, was there anything that surprised you as you were writing the book?
Well, this is what was interesting to us as we were running through the recipes is that it became obvious to us that worldwide, the two most popular foods, do you know what they are? Rice and chicken. Yep. Universal. It was stunning. And I should point out too, it's almost always boiled. Both of them. So, yeah.
One of the things that surprised me, which shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, was to hear the stories over and over and over about how difficult it is to be an immigrant. I think that there is so much narrative about people who come here, they find a job, they have it easy, they slide into a community. But the work, the challenge, and the isolation that many of the immigrants feel is really just so profound, and it doesn't end overnight. People who had been here for 20 years, for longer, said over and over again that I still have one foot, in both countries, that I'd never feel like I totally belong here. And when I think about the question about what we can do to help, we have to make sure that they feel like they're part of our communities and that they're part of this country, because they are part of this country.
Yeah, I would say to that point, making connections with people was just a delight, and I feel like just my world really expanded. Not only being able to participate in sharing so many stories from so many different kinds of situations, and also learning to cook their recipes. And one of the favorite things I like to share is that I was talking to my youngest son about it, and he observed that people were sharing such intimate things with us, and I thought he meant the stories, and he meant the recipes. And that was such an interesting insight of his that I've carried with me. And it's true. I mean, these are family heritages that people are sharing with all of us.
Okay. Since people do not uproot their lives casually and must have longings for home, how much did you learn about people's desires to return home if conditions make that possible? And do we make it possible for people to reflect positively on their time in the U.S. if they do get a chance to return home?
Well, it depends on how people came, right? Some people came under circumstances that they are not really able to return home, and so they just carry that longing with them. Other people came in ways and under circumstances where they sort of have free ability to move home and back. And I think I would say, from my impression, it's like a both and. There's always going to be a longing. There's always going to be something that you lost. And these people are remarkably resilient in making, they've got new communities and new traditions, and this is a new home for them. So it's really a both and thing that will probably remain throughout their life.
There were a number of people who came to the United States and go back and forth, to countries. Blaise Mazinga, was one of them who goes back and forth and set up a clinic, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ingrid Kubisa has goals of setting up a coffee shop, in the DRC. There are people that have expressed many desires to, incorporate their former homelands into more accessible. Some of that depends clearly on visas and the like as well.
So I think we're going to have to end it there, but there are opportunities to buy books in the back between now and when the start of the next service. So I think somebody will be sitting back there. You could talk to any of our guests. But would you please help me thank Michele, Linda, Kristen, and Lee for their presentation today. I can't tell you how much I've been an observer for advocates. I can't tell you how profound an experience that is, and how much your involvement in some way, like Elena talked about, having skin in the game and actually acting in this time is so important. So thank you so much for being here today. And we'll see you after the holidays. The Social Justice Forum is on hiatus over the Christmas holiday. So thank you again for coming.